Some questions aren't looking for answers, they're looking for cracks to slip through. They come disguised as curiosity, but they're loaded with judgment, pity, or control. And at a certain age, explaining yourself feels like opening your front door to someone who didn't come to visit, but to inspect. Here's the truth. The older you get, the more some people feel entitled to comment on your body, your choices, your story. As if growing old were a surrender, not a triumph. But you weren't born to ask for permission or justify the way you live. In this video, we're going to walk through 8 questions that don't deserve an answer. Not because you have nothing to say, but because answering them drains you, exposes you, and gives up ground that's already yours. Stay with me till the end, because the last of these questions touches a wound many carry in silence, and that's exactly where silence becomes most urgent. I'm Gabriel, and here at the Stoic Garden, we say out loud what others keep quiet out of habit, because your respect is non-negotiable, and your silence can be a form of dignity. Why haven't you remarried? That question lands like a stone thrown into still water, not to understand it, but to see how much it can stir it up. Sometimes it comes with a fake smile, other times with a tone of false concern. But at its core, it always carries something else: judgment, pity, discomfort. As if a woman past 60 needed to justify her relationship status like it were an unpaid debt. This is the first point of this video. Don't answer when someone asks why you haven't remarried. Because that question doesn't come from genuine curiosity, it comes from a gaze that can't handle your autonomy, as if being alone were a mistake to be fixed, a flaw that demands explanation. But you're not alone. You're with yourself, and that's a place many can't inhabit without fear. Let me be clear. We live in a culture that celebrates companionship, even when it's toxic, that applauds marriage, even when it's an emotional graveyard. But when a woman chooses not to play that game again, when she chooses peace over appearances, she becomes unsettling, a threat, a mirror to all those other women still pretending there's love where there's nothing left. An old story comes to mind. They say someone once asked an elderly nun if she ever felt sad about never marrying. She answered, "I've lived alone with God, and in silence, I've learned not to need witnesses to feel complete." That reply holds more wisdom than 1,000 speeches about the perfect relationship. Because when a woman finds her own voice, she no longer owes answers to empty questions. Seneca put it another way: the greatest wealth is to be content with little, and the greatest power to depend on no one. It doesn't mean settling for less. It means choosing from a place of wholeness. And if you've made it this far, you know, there's no worse company than one that's forced. No deeper poverty than tying yourself to someone just to avoid the questions. So when someone questions your marital status, remember this: your life is not incomplete, you're not waiting for anyone, you're choosing. And that unsettles people, because choosing means having clarity. And female clarity, past a certain age, terrifies those who always preferred us dependent, grateful, silent. Staying quiet in the face of that question isn't avoidance. It's standing firm in the truth that your story is not up for public inspection, that your privacy isn't served up to someone who hasn't walked beside you, and that you don't need to explain why you prefer your peace to the noise of a soulless relationship. So next time someone dares ask why you haven't remarried, look at them with the calm of someone who's made peace with herself. Don't answer. Don't justify. Because the one in need of an explanation isn't you. It's the one who still believes real love only exists in company. The truth is, questions about your marital status aren't the only ones that test your dignity. Sometimes it's not your love life they question, it's your time. They do it with a patronizing tone, as if they're assessing how much use you still are. And in that voice, laced with contempt disguised as kindness, comes another line you should learn to meet with silence. What do you do with all your free time? This brings us to the second key point in this video: Don't explain how you spend your days. Don't hand anyone a map of your routine just so they can use it to judge you. That question isn't born of genuine interest. It comes from a cruel logic, the one that ties worth to productivity, presence to obligation, free time to waste. The root of this problem isn't new. We come from a culture that raised women to serve, not to contemplate. If you're not raising children, attending to someone, solving something, or cooking, then you're doing nothing. That's how we were domesticated. And when you finally earn the right to be with yourself, to live at your own pace, along comes this question that reminds you the world still expects you to justify your existence. From a Stoic perspective, time isn't something you spend, it's something you inhabit. Marcus Aurelius said it plainly, "The greatest loss is the loss of time, because it's the one thing we can't get back." But for those who never learned to live in stillness, seeing an older woman calm, unhurried, at peace, it unsettles them, as if she's doing something wrong by no longer rushing. And that's where this question hits hardest. Because what it truly questions isn't your routine, it's your right to live without having to explain. It makes you wonder if you should be doing more, when in reality, what you're doing now, taking care of yourself, walking without urgency, sipping tea in silence, watching a movie alone, staring out the window, is a sacred act of healing. You're rebuilding after years of silent giving, and even if they don't get it, that is sacred work. This way of judging free time also eats away at self-esteem. Many women reach old age feeling guilty for resting. They wake up and look for pointless tasks just to avoid feeling useless. They sign up for activities they don't enjoy, agree to favors they don't want to give, all to dodge the uncomfortable question, "So what do you do?" But that question no longer deserves an answer. You don't need to justify your rest or turn it into productivity for it to be valid. Your peace is not for sale. Mental health suffers too, because living from guilt is a prison. And worse, it's a prison decorated with fake smiles, where people say, "Good for you for staying active," while secretly thinking you're no longer useful. But you're not here to meet others' expectations. You're here to live fully, even if that means doing less, moving slower, or simply letting the day pass without urgency. Spiritually, there's a deeper truth. The soul needs space, and that space is called time. Time to pray, to meditate, to talk with yourself. Time to think about God, not out of duty, but out of intimacy. But that kind of time can't be shown, can't be measured. It's invisible to those who only value what can be counted. That's why, when someone asks what you do with all your free time, don't answer. Because they don't have the eyes to see that you are quietly blooming. Your time isn't free, it's full of you, and that is enough. By now, it shouldn't come as a surprise that many of the questions asked of older women aren't really questions at all. They're veiled judgments. They come dressed as concern, but what they're really after is control, guilt, or resignation. And if we've already talked about your relationship status and your time, there's another question that deserves even more silence. Aren't you afraid of ending up alone? This brings us to the third point of this video, and here's where things start to shift. Because this question doesn't just carry emotional weight, it also reveals a deep misunderstanding of what it means to be alone in later life. Being alone is not the same as feeling empty. They are not the same. The fear of solitude that others project onto you doesn't have to be yours. In fact, learning to be alone can be one of the most powerful and spiritually mature decisions you can make. Not to shut yourself off from the world, but to reconnect with yourself without the constant noise of other people's demands. The Stoic strategy here isn't to deny fear, but to transform it, not to run from solitude, but to turn it into sacred ground. Marcus Aurelius taught us that the mind of the wise is like an inner citadel, a place no one can enter without your permission. And building that citadel begins with embracing your own company, not as a punishment, but as a privilege. A practical way to start is to consciously set aside at least 1 hour a day to be with yourself, free from outside distractions. No TV, no social media, no phone calls, just you, your thoughts, and whatever lives in your soul. At first it might feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, but if you stick with it, you'll start to hear answers inside you that you'd never hear with the world buzzing around. Let me give you an image to make this clearer. Imagine you've been living in a house that's always full of visitors, some pleasant, others invasive. Then one day, they all leave. At first, that silence feels like a void, but then you realize that for the first time, you can move the furniture, paint the walls, open the windows. You start seeing your home with new eyes. That's what happens when you learn to inhabit your solitude without fear. You no longer rely on others' presence to validate your existence. You are enough. You are. And now, I want to invite you to do something with me. If this content resonates with you, if it feels like it's speaking directly to your heart, I invite you to subscribe and give this video a like. That way, we can keep creating more spaces like this, where respect isn't a favor, but a foundation. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, and write the phrase, "My solitude is mine." That statement holds incredible power when spoken with intention. And don't go just yet. There are deeper truths to uncover, and the final lesson might completely change the way you see your role in this stage of life. When an older woman starts finding peace in her solitude, the world tends to react, not with applause, but with more questions, as if the quiet she's worked so hard to build were a threat to those still trapped in the noise. That's when another question surfaces, crueler than the ones before, because it strikes at the very heart of your story. Why don't your children help you? This is the fourth point of this video, and it's an open wound for many, because this question never comes alone. It brings with it a load of guilt, shame, and misunderstood obligation. It reduces you to a mother, not a person, not a human being with desires of her own, but a role that should have long shed its most self-sacrificing form. The trap here is thinking you need to answer, that you have to explain why your children aren't around, why they don't call, why they don't help, as if their absence were your fault, as if their indifference was something you caused. This mistake is dangerous because it runs deep into the story you were taught from a young age, where motherhood was the center of your existence, where being a good mother meant giving everything always, without asking, without expecting, without stopping. And when the time comes to receive, and that giving is never returned, silence creeps in. And that silence, if misunderstood, becomes punishment. But it's not. It's revelation. From a Stoic perspective, what isn't up to you should never steal your peace. Epictetus was clear. The only things that truly belong to you are your thoughts, your actions, your choices. You can't control what your children do or don't do, but you can choose what space you give them in your mind and in your life. Answering that question, why don't they help you, is handing your power back over. It's waiting for something that may never come, and waiting without purpose is a slow way to die. The consequences of falling into this trap are devastating. You begin to justify absence, to normalize disregard, to tell a story where you're always the understanding one, the available one, the one who never gets tired. But inside, the wound deepens. Your autonomy weakens because you're constantly hoping they'll change one day. Your peace shatters because you ask yourself questions that have no answers. What did I do wrong? Why don't they value me? Was I not enough? And in that storm of doubt, you disappear. Don't answer. Don't offer your pain to the judgment of someone who doesn't understand what it means to love through motherhood and grow old through abandonment. Your story doesn't need defending, it needs respect. And that begins with self-respect. You are not less worthy because your children aren't present. You are not less of a mother because you have nothing left to give. You are a whole woman, and your dignity is not tied to someone else's gratitude. The next time someone asks why your children don't help you, stay silent. But not a bitter or resentful silence. A calm silence, the kind that comes from knowing not every bond brings companionship, and that true loyalty begins when you stop betraying yourself to excuse others. That silence is yours, and by now, it's also your shield. In the fifth point of this video, we step into uncomfortable territory. Why do you still bother getting dressed up at your age? It's a question often asked with feigned innocence, but it carries a subtle, corrosive violence. Because what it really says is, you no longer need to be attractive, there's no one left to impress, you're not worth looking at anymore. It's a statement disguised as a question. A verdict meant to convince you that your body, your face, your presence no longer matter. And if you believe it, you begin to dim. Following that logic is devastating, because it's not just about losing interest in your appearance, it's about losing the connection to your own body. You stop looking in the mirror, not because you don't recognize yourself, but because you've learned to see through others' eyes. Through the eyes of a world that celebrates youth and treats aging as a flaw to be tolerated, not a stage to be honored. And that wears you down, because every day you look without seeing, dress without intention, walk without inhabiting yourself, you reinforce the idea that your presence no longer matters. You become invisible, not because you are, but because you've stopped standing in your own light. The result is a silent chain. Frustration becomes resignation, resignation turns into dependency, and dependency erodes self-respect. And once you lose that, others sense it, not out of cruelty, but out of habit. As if your body no longer deserved dignity because you stopped treating it with care. But this isn't about surface-level beauty. It's not about makeup, trends, or pretending. It's about presence, about how each day you choose to get dressed with intention, to comb your hair with attention, to walk with confidence. You're telling the world, I'm still here. I haven't left. I haven't given up. Turning this around isn't easy. It's not about buying new clothes or adopting artificial routines. It's about changing how you see yourself, understanding that your body is your temple, not your burden, that every act of care is a declaration of life, that as long as you breathe, you have the right to feel beautiful, not for anyone else, for you, because you still deserve to see yourself with kindness. You still deserve to feel at home in your own skin. And that begins with one small but powerful decision. Treat your body like it matters, because it does. The mindset you need isn't one of fighting time, it's one of making peace with it. You accept the marks, the changes, the signs of the road traveled, but not from a place of neglect, from awareness. You don't need to be young to be beautiful, you need to be present, and that's what many people don't understand. That showing up, looking put together, isn't vanity. It's a quiet act of resistance. It's how you remind yourself that you're still alive, still a beacon, even if no one's looking anymore. So next time someone asks why you still bother getting dressed up, don't answer. Don't open the door to judgment from those who've confused age with irrelevance. Look at them calmly and keep walking. Because your presence isn't a favor you're doing, it's an act of self-respect. And if someone can't see that, it's not your job to explain. It's your right to live it. After everything we've said, it's clear that every gesture you make toward yourself, getting dressed with dignity, staying silent in the face of questions that don't deserve answers, is no small thing. These are choices that draw the line between living with self-respect and giving in to resignation. But there's a quieter, more dangerous trap that many women don't recognize until it's too late, one that poisons the very root of inner freedom. The sixth point of this video is this: don't you get bored without a partner? Take a moment and consider the kind of life behind that question. It's a life built around external validation, where someone's presence isn't always about love, but habit, need, or fear of being alone. Now picture a day in that routine. You wake up, go through the motions, and the person beside you no longer looks at you the same, no longer listens, no longer respects you, but they're still there. And somehow for many people that seems to be enough. Habit replaces desire. Soulless companionship replaces authenticity, and little by little, you start to fade. It's hard to say, but even harder to live. Many women have been raised to endure the unbearable rather than face the void. They've normalized subtle mistreatment, emotional neglect, and constant undervaluing just so they can say, "I'm not alone." But at what cost? How much of your self-respect did you have to give away to keep that connection? How many times did you have to swallow your feelings, deny your needs, delay your dreams, just to keep the other person comfortable? That's not love. That's emotional erosion. That's living on the edge of yourself. The idea that being alone is a failure is a lie that's been repeated for generations, and it becomes dangerous when you start to believe it. Because then, you don't ask whether the relationship is good for you. You ask if you can handle losing it. But living out of fear never leads to peace. What many don't understand is that it's not about being in a relationship or not, it's about choosing from wholeness, not from lack. You can absolutely be in a relationship at 60, 70, or 80. Of course you can, but only if that relationship lifts you, protects you, sees you. Not if it dims you, manipulates you, or makes you disappear. Not answering that question, "Don't you get bored without a partner?" is an act of clarity. Because the person asking it is starting from a false assumption that life without someone beside you is less of a life. And you know that's not true. You know that in the quiet of an afternoon alone, with no interruptions, no explanations, you can find more fullness than in 1,000 forced conversations with someone who doesn't listen. It's not solitude that bores us. It's pretending in a relationship that's lost its meaning. And here's the image I want to leave you with. Picture yourself at the very end of your life. No more time to fix things, no more excuses to make. What would you regret more, walking alone with dignity or spending years with someone who silenced your voice? That question isn't trivial. It's defining. Because what's really at stake isn't whether you're alone or accompanied, it's whether you're alive or you've given up. Your life even now, even today, can still change course. But that only happens when you decide to stop explaining yourself, stop pleasing others, stop fearing loneliness. True love, whether for another or for yourself, never grows from emptiness. It grows from fullness. And to get there, sometimes you have to learn to be alone without apologizing for it. If in the previous chapter we spoke about the emptiness that hides behind certain relationships, now it's time to go deeper. Because once you clearly see what no longer serves you, sharper, more painful questions begin to surface. The kind that aren't spoken aloud, but are felt in someone's gaze or in their silence. And the harshest one of all is this: are you still waiting for them to change? This is the 7th point in this video, and it hits the hardest. Because it doesn't come from the outside, it comes from within. It's the inner voice that, even after so much disappointment, still wonders if maybe tomorrow will be different. If maybe your son will come around. If maybe that friend will start valuing you again. If maybe that person who hurt you so deeply will finally understand what it cost you to keep them close. But waiting, when it never ends, isn't patience. It's denial. And living in wait for what's beyond your control is a quiet way of giving up your life. Because as long as you're waiting for someone else to change, you're frozen. You stop moving, stop growing, stop making decisions for yourself. You become a spectator in a story that no longer belongs to you. Personal transformation doesn't happen when everything gets better. It happens when you decide to stop postponing the inevitable. There's no wisdom in continuing to justify someone else's cruelty with phrases like, "They don't know any better." That's just how they show love. "I've made mistakes too." Of course there are shared wounds. Of course there are complex stories. But clinging to the hope that, by some miracle, everything will one day fix itself, that's the surest path to frustration and lonely despair. There's no redemption as long as you're holding up something that can no longer stand. Seneca put it plainly. There is no favorable wind for the sailor who doesn't know where he's going. And if your direction depends on someone else changing, then you're not moving anywhere. You're stuck. And the worst part of being stuck isn't just not moving, it's that time doesn't wait. Every day you spend waiting is a day you didn't live for yourself, and that hurts, but realizing it too late hurts even more. This is where responsibility becomes essential. Not the kind that burdens you with guilt, but the kind that empowers you to take charge of what is actually yours, your decisions, your boundaries, your energy. No one can promise that letting go of the weight will bring instant relief. It won't. At first, it hurts, because letting go of misplaced hope is painful, but it's a clean pain, the pain of someone finally waking up and choosing themselves. So when that question starts to echo in your mind, don't answer it. Don't justify anything. Breathe and recognize that the waiting is over. Today, you choose to move forward, to speak clearly, to close chapters without drama. The change isn't out there, it's within you. And continuing to wait only takes away the power you already have, because when you finally stop waiting, you start living. And that, more than anything, is what this stage of life demands. To live with the clarity of someone who no longer lies to herself, and with the strength of someone who is finally free. After letting go of the useless waiting, after realizing you can no longer keep postponing your life based on what others do or don't do, we arrive at the most poisonous wound of all. One that's not always spoken aloud, but that many women have carried for years without even realizing it. The 8th point in this video is this: so what did you do wrong? This question doesn't deserve an answer, not because you don't have a story, but because the person asking doesn't want to understand it. They want to condemn you. It's a veiled way of saying that if your family is fractured, if your children don't speak to you, if your relationships have grown cold, it's because you failed, because you did something wrong. And when you take on that burden without questioning it, you become the warden of your own guilt. That's the most destructive trap of all, living with a constant sense of debt, failure, and inadequacy. And from that place, there's no peace, no faith, no room for rebuilding, only exhaustion. The concrete action I'm proposing today is not easy, but it's urgent. Close the door to that narrative. From now on, every time someone, yourself included, tries to bring that question back to life, respond with an inner silence that is firm, not evasive, but certain. The certainty of someone who gave all she could, who loved with the maturity she had at the time, who made mistakes like anyone else, but never out of malice. And above all, someone who will no longer allow herself to be judged by those who were never there when what she needed most was understanding. The mindset needed to sustain this shift is not that of someone who defends herself, but of someone who sets herself free. Because defending yourself keeps you in other people's game. It means trying to prove you're not guilty. But freedom is something else. It's understanding that real love doesn't demand constant explanations, that your mistakes don't make you less of a mother, less of a woman, less worthy. They make you human. And no one has the right to reduce your entire life to what didn't go right, ignoring everything you gave out of love, care, and instinct. If this change stays just as a nice phrase, it's useless. It has to become habit. It has to filter into your daily thoughts, your inner dialogue, your everyday decisions. When someone tries to revive that guilt, don't respond with arguments, respond with dignity. And if you fall into that inner judgment yourself, stop. Say it clearly. I will not carry what doesn't belong to me. That phrase, said with awareness, is more powerful than 1,000 apologies no one asked for, but you've been offering for years. Because in the end, every path to redemption begins with recognizing that your story doesn't need approval, that your worth isn't defined by the mistakes you made, nor by the versions others have told about you. It begins when you stand strong in the present and tell yourself without flinching, who I am today is enough. And from there, everything begins to heal. Getting to this point is no small thing. What you've heard in this video isn't just advice or comforting phrases. They're hard truths, the kind that sting at first, but set you free afterward. Because if there's one thing we've learned together, it's that silence, when it comes from clarity, isn't cowardice. It's a way of protecting your dignity. Choosing which questions don't deserve an answer is a way of taking back control, of closing doors that no longer lead anywhere, of stopping the need to explain what should never have been questioned in the first place. And that, at a stage of life when many think there's nothing left to fight for, is an act of resistance. We're not here to comfort you with sweet lies. We're here to push you with truths that matter. And if you're still with me, it's because something inside you has already started to wake up. Very few people have the courage to look at their story with new eyes, but you did. So if you've made it this far, I want to ask you something simple yet important. Leave a comment telling me what country you're listening from and write the phrase, "My silence is firm." That's not just a symbolic gesture, it's a declaration. It's your way of saying, I've understood, I've let go, and now I choose to walk from a different place. And believe me, when other women read your words, they won't feel alone. They'll feel a silent, powerful network of women who've decided to stop living in guilt or judgment and start living from their center. My name is Gabriel, and this channel, The Stoic Garden, exists for a clear reason. Because I firmly believe that life after 60 isn't a leftover, it's a new beginning. And that beginning needs a voice that doesn't sugarcoat what's bitter, but also doesn't give up on what can still bloom. We're not looking for followers here, we're looking for allies. Women who don't want to be entertained, but awakened. Women who aren't looking for lukewarm company, but steady direction. I invite you to subscribe, not for the numbers, but because this space needs to be supported by those who truly believe that respect is non-negotiable and peace is worth defending, even with silence. Share this video with someone who's still explaining herself too much, who still thinks she needs to justify her worth to be loved. Sometimes, what a word can't do, a firm voice at the right moment can. And if you feel like there's still more to understand, more to say, don't stop here. Watch one of the videos that will appear on your screen. There, we keep talking about what so many stay silent about and what you're now ready to face. Because this doesn't end here. It's just beginning.